Hello viewers, today we're diving into a critical part of pre-flop play.
A re-raise from Jen.
The 4-bet. What is it, when to do it, and how to size it like a pro. Firstly, a super quick definition for the beginners and a reminder for the more experienced players. What is a 4-bet? Pre-flop, the blinds that are posted are considered the first bet. The first pre-flop raise you make is considered the 2-bet. A re-raise is considered the 3-bet. And when someone talks about a 4-bet, they're talking about the second re-raise. The re-raise is the 4-bet. We normally use numbers here because the idea of someone saying, well, I raised and then they re-raised and then I re-raised and then they re-raised can get understandably a little confusing. A 4-bet can be a cold 4-bet. This is when a player raises, a player re-raises the 3-bet, and then a brand new player, completely new to the action, then 4-bets, raises the re-raise. Let's assume anytime I say a 4-bet, I'm talking about the initial raiser re-raising, and if it's a cold 4-bet, that means a new player that's entered the game. So why 4-bet in the first place? We're going to look at a hijack versus button opportunity. Let's jump to the hijack. We'll make the hijack open, and we're going to make the button 3-bet in this case. Blinds are going to get out of the way, and the hijack's going to have a 4-bet opportunity here. You can see 4-betting 20% of the time, calling 30% of the time, and folding 50. Now, you should 4-bet for one of two reasons. The first reason is, of course, for value. We look at the strategy and EV of our hands. We have hands that are clear improvements in terms of the EV expected value by re-raising, hands like aces, hands like ace king suited, hands like kings. You should also 4-bet sometimes as a bluff. You can see if we look at our 4-betting hands, the non-lin ones, we have our clear value bets that we already talked about, aces, ace king and kings. Everything else is going to be pretty mixed in terms of there's not going to be a significant EV difference. These are essentially your quote bluff hands, not pure bluff hands, but anything that is close. You can see there isn't a significant difference in calling or raising, and these are our bluff hands that are there to support our value hands. If we were to only raise our value, when we look at theory, and if you think about it, hijack versus button isn't going to be the absolute tightest that you'd ever be in a 4-bet spot. Despite this, you can see only 3 hands that are clear EV differences between 4-betting and not 4-betting. Those hands are kings, ace king, and aces. Everything else, including queens for example, is neutral EV. Whether we flat this or whether we 4-bet doesn't actually make a difference in a one-off hand in terms of expected value, but obviously our range would suffer if we were to only 4-bet our kings, aces, and ace king suited. However, against good opponents who have a balanced 3-betting range, if you have a limited amount of premium hands, you're going to have a very limited bluffing range too. And the overall reduction in your 4-bet frequency actually incentivizes your opponent to 3-bet wider with more bluffs and value. So 4-betting is very important, but how do you build a 4-betting range? Let's start with your value hands. These are the hands that can be 4-bet for value, and they're going to be varied based on a few different factors we're going to talk about. First one we'll talk about is position. Your position and your opponent's position matter a lot when it comes to dictating that value threshold. Let's imagine we're in a tournament and someone's open under the gun. Under the gun +1 has 3-bet, and we're under the gun +2 looking at cold 4-bet. What's our value threshold? So let's jump to Lucid and have a look. Make under the gun open. We're going to make under gun +1 3-bet, and you can see that our value threshold in this case would be queens, kings, ace king, and aces. All other hands, 10s, 9s, jacks, ace jack suited, are either pure folds and losing money by VPing them, or mixed frequency 3-bets and folds. Ace queen suited here would be mixing between folding and 3-betting for a little bit of extra value, essentially as a bluff. And you can see that very quickly, based on tight ranges, your 4-bet range can become incredibly tight. And you can see that the VPIP in this situation, being in the low jack after the under the gun's opened, the under the gun +1 is 3-bet. We are 4-betting 3% of our range. 97% of the time, we fold here. Now let's imagine a situation where the position is different. In this case, we'll try our Lucid's position. Instead of the under the gun open, let's have the button open in this case. The button we know is going to open a wide range. We'll have the small blind 3-bet. You can see the small blind here, 3-betting a wide-ish range. And now we look at the big blind 4-betting. So in this case, the big blind's 4-betting 10% of the range. Hands like 6s, hands like ace jack off. It's a very different range than we had the low jack 4-betting the under the gun +1 3-better compared to the big blind 3-bet and small blind. Now, exactly the same pre-flop actions occurred, but the only thing that's different is the positions of the players. So I hope this demonstrates a little bit just how important that position is when it comes to dictating your 4-bet strategy. Now, how big should your 4-bets be? Now, a lot of this will come down to whether you're in position or if you're out of position against the 3-better and the first raiser. So let's take an example where we're in position on the button. looking to 4-bet. We'll say the hijack has opened. We'll say the cut was 3-bet. You can see here that the button now 4-bets to a 16.2 sizing. Not the biggest sizing in the world, looking to just over double the 3-betters pre-flop sizing. However, let's imagine now we're out of position. So in this case, we'll have the cut of open, we'll have the button 3-bet, the blinds will fold, and the cutoff being out of position in this case will raise to 18 big blinds. So a little over 2.5x now. A lot will also depend on your stack depth here, but the general rule is when you're out of position, you should be sizing your 4-bets a little bit higher. Being out of position in general is bad for you post-flop, and you're going to under-realize EV being out of position compared to being in position, and therefore you're incentivized to 4-bet and 3-bet a little bit bigger. We talked about position and we talked about 4-bet sizing. Now let's talk about the stack depths that we have. In tournaments, your stack depth is king in terms of determining your 4-bet sizing. So in 100 BB, in a tournament, as with a cash game, it's going to be similar, that 2.2x in position and maybe that 2.6x out of position. Again, that's approximate, but a good rule of thumb. If we take this tournament at 50 BB, we're going to see a mixed strategy. So some of our hands are actually going to want to 4-bet jam, and some of our hands are going to want to non-all-in 4-bet. Typically, we're going to see aces and kings and our strong value use a non-all-in sizing, whilst other more marginal value is typically going to be the type that will shove. As you get shallower, more and more of these hands will shove. So if we look at 30 big blinds, for example, often you'll see actually a lot of shoving here, if not range shoving. And so at 30 BB, for example, we see we don't have a non-all-in 4-bet sizing anymore. We just shove our entire range, and we have a very clear delineation. Hands that are good enough to shove and play for the stack, and hands that aren't, we just fold. A few closing tips. As mentioned earlier, aces, kings, and ace-king suited are pretty much always 4-bet in nearly all situations. However, we've got options of how to construct the rest of our 4-betting range against different opponents. A lot will depend on how your opponent has constructed their 3-betting range. So let's talk about a few different opponent types. Let's have a look at a cash game example here. So we're going to be in the cutoff. We're going to open at 100 big blinds. The button's going to 3-bet us. The blind's going to get out of the way. It's folded back to us, and we're deciding whether to 4-bet a hand or whether to not 4-bet a hand. If your opponent on the button is incredibly tight and doesn't 3-bet enough of their bluffs or their marginal value,
the worst laydown you've ever seen in history.
I folded it, Mike.
you can see a very merged range of 3-betting from the button here. We have to be very, very cautious with our 4-bets, especially the 4-bets which are marginal value. So if we have a look at it, jacks, for example, is equal in EV between 4-betting and flatting, 10s, 9s, 8s, ace-jack suited, ace-queen suited. These are good hands to sometimes flat if you think your opponent is a little bit too tight in their 3-betting range, because getting 5-bet jammed when you hold queens, ace-queen, jacks from a tight opponent really sucks. And against that tight opponent, we also don't need to bluff as much. Our ace-5 suited, our 7-6 suited, our 6-5 suited. Incidentally, if you notice, the 6-5 suited is VPPing 100% of the time here, whilst the 9-8 suited isn't. If you'd like to know why that is, please see an early video where we talk about the difference between 6-5 suited and 9-8 suited. Against the super tight opponents, in general, not 4-betting the bluffs as much is necessary because their 3-betting range just doesn't require us to do so. Now let's imagine you're playing a loose, wild opponent, someone that raises loads and calls 4-bets loads. Now we can shift our 4-betting strategy in a different direction. Again, we don't need to take as many of the bluffs. There's not that much need to 4-bet a hand like 8-7 suited or pocket 7s if your opponent's going to be calling really, really wide, and we're not betting for some of the folds that we should be getting when 4-betting these hands. Instead, what we can do is 4-bet a much more concentrated value range with much fewer bluffs. We can really punish an opponent that is 3-betting wildly and calling 4-bets too wide by 4-betting more of our ace-queen off, our ace-queen suited, the pocket jacks, the pocket 10s, the queen-jack suited, the king-jack suited, the king-queen suited, the ace-jack suited, etc. Condensing that range into the top end, and in particular paying attention to hands like ace-king off and pocket jacks, which are sometimes 4-bet jam, and instead looking to 4-bet the non-all-in, is a really powerful way that you can take advantage of the guys that 3-bet very wide and then call 4-bets very wide. One final opponent type. Let's imagine someone who's pretty good and they have a balanced 3-betting strategy. Against this opponent, it's important to try and have an understanding of the kind of hands you want to 4-bet. If you don't understand and you 4-bet too much of your value, that's a problem. If you don't understand and you 4-bet way too tight a range and only kings plus, again, as we discussed, that's a problem. You should have a good 4-betting strategy based on some of the theoretical play that you see here, and you should have good board coverage across multiple boards, because a good opponent could take advantage of you, especially on those low boards, if you haven't got any board coverage when the flop comes 7, 8, 9, for example. You become a much harder opponent to face at the poker tables if you can find the right kind of bluffs, the right kind of value, and the right kind of sizes when it comes to your 4-betting strategy. On top of that, you're going to disincentivize your opponents from being able to take advantage of you by 3-betting wider when you are going to be able to counter their 3-bets correctly. You'll have good board coverage, and you'll be able to represent on lots of boards, as well as have value and bluffs on lots of different boards too, which is very important. Mastering that 4-bet is one of the key foundational aspects, whether it comes to cash games, whether it comes to tournaments, in terms of really unlocking those higher win rates. And it's something you should really spend some time studying if you haven't done so yet. If you like this breakdown, you are very welcome to limp in on that like button, check cool the subscribe button, and raise a comment below. Doesn't work that one, does it? But they're all poker analogies, aren't they? Of course, Lucid Poker is available. We're going to be regularly putting out some more strategy content in the coming weeks and months in the foreseeable future. So I'll hopefully see you guys in the next one, and I appreciate all of the interactions you'll give for the algorithm if you want to. Thanks for watching. Happy 4-betting. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.